The Taxi Regulation Review Report 2011, which was adopted by the Government, contains a recommendation regarding the introduction of a local area hackney licence for rural locations meeting certain criteria. The objective of the local area hackney licence is to facilitate, as the Deputy is aware, a low-cost entry to the hackney market for transport provision in rural areas that otherwise would be unlikely to have such services. The report anticipated that the licence would have the following features. The area of operation would be limited. The need for a local area hackney licence would have to be validated by a local community or business group. There would be low entry cost for operators. Drivers would have to be resident in the area in respect of which the need for the service has been identified, and there would be no requirement to sit area knowledge tests. And finally, the driver would not be allowed to apply for hire on public roads or at taxi ranks. However, the establishment of an approved hackney stand in an off-area street would be permissible. In accordance with the Taxi Regulation Act 2003, it is a matter for the National Transport Authority to make the regulatory provision for the grant of such a local area hackney licence. I understand from the NTA it is considering the matter in consultation with the Taxi Advisory Committee, which includes representatives of the taxi and hackney industry. Matters such as those raised by the Deputy are still part of the discussions with industry representatives, and no firm decisions has been made on many of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Pringle.
Thank you, Gaelic. Minister, I raised this issue on the second stage of the taxi regulation bill as well before the summer break, and I think it is something that you should ask the NTA to give very serious consideration to, because in rural areas there is a large number of hackneys already operating and taxis operating in rural areas who are struggling to make a living in the current climate. And I think to introduce another licensing brand into the area will only make that even more difficult for any of them to survive. And I think the rural transport model is going to be used to roll out this rural hackney service could be used and using the existing taxi and hackneyed licences that are there to provide the service, and that would ensure fair play for everyone. Because I do believe, and I think you acknowledge yourself, the difficulties in terms of regulating this new licence if it's introduced. With only, I think it's 19 regulators across the country, the chances are that these hackneys will be operating outside of their areas, and it won't in effect be policed. And I think it's vitally important, out of fairness, to give the existing licence holders the opportunity to tender for these runs, and then only in the event that they fail to pick up the slack, that then the consideration will be given to the new licences. I would ask the NTA to deal with that. Thanks.
Minister.
Thank you. Deputy, yourself and many others have raised this issue with me. There is market failure in rural areas as regards services, and we need to ensure that the provisions we're bringing forward through the legislation I'm bringing forward, and also the regulations with the NTA, ensures that we have an appropriate service in rural areas where there is market failure. It's as simple as that. I understand your concerns. The NTA are going through a process with the Advisory Committee, the Taxi Advisory Committee, in relation to this to address those concerns. But really what we're trying to ensure is that at all costs there is services in isolated rural areas. For many of the reasons that many deputies have raised with me and raised with other ministers across other areas, I think it's critically important that that happens. I do accept what the deputy is saying in relation to ensuring that these new rural hackney licences, that there is proper enforcement. And I am quite confident, given the provisions I've made in the legislation, being able to increase the level of enforcement, that we will be able to do that.